Bikini Bottom!
Ooh, lives in a lab way up in a tree. Come from Texas down to the sea.
Saving Bikini Bottom, the Sandy Cheeks movie. As SpongeBob SquarePants is celebrating 25 years of being one of the most popular cartoons in television history, it seems fitting to release a new movie featuring the characters and all their nautical nonsense as one of the ways to honor the occasion. But unlike SpongeBob's previous feature-length adventures, this one is a spin-off where one of his dear friends, Sandy Cheeks, is taking center stage. But as much as Sandy has some good karate skills and great intellect, would she be strong and smart enough to carry her own feature? I find this to be an interesting question to ask because, let's be honest, some of you already know this answer long before it was released.
What's happening?
You may remember this particular moment early in the year. I don't know who, I don't know how, I don't know why, even if rumors say that it was some networking error, but the entire completed movie was leaked onto Twitter for the whole internet to see. Paramount was able to take it down hours after the incident, but the damage was already done, and many animation fans were able to get a very early preview of what the squirrel and the sponge had in store. And based on what I've heard from those who did see it, oh boy, we might be in for some Texas-sized trouble. However, even if some had their discussions out months prior, I want to see this for myself to know what this is all about. Especially now that it is released on Netflix and that we can officially make our judgment. So now that Sandy's settling up for the 4th SpongeBob movie, will this land creature ride through a feature as well as the sea critters? Or is it more than just Bikini Bottom that needs saving? Let's find out. The story. I'd like to start by saying that I actually like the idea of a Sandy Cheeks movie. Since this is a spin-off film, it opens the opportunity to experiment beyond the formula that it established for SpongeBob's features and explore different film genres in order to deliver something new, but has a bit of familiarity by maintaining the spirit of the popular series. In the case of a movie starring Sandy, this can make the most out of her personality by having this be a kung fu western. Sounds pretty awesome, right? Well, too bad the movie is not smart enough to have that kind of creativity.
Ow. Wait. Stand by for my learning curve.
The story that this picture came up with instead can be best described as a combination of Sponge Out of Water and Finding Nemo, where the entirety of Bikini Bottom is taken to the surface, where the residents are threatened to become living toys that the villain would sell to kids. And just like Marlin and Dory on their mission to rescue Nemo, it's up to Sandy and SpongeBob to go to Texas so that they can bring their home and their friends back into the ocean.
Texas? Woohoo! Going to Texas to save our friends! Yeah!
Unfortunately, this is a case where the storytelling is not among the film's priority. I wouldn't even say it was placed on the side because that would imply that it has some form of importance. The way this movie treats it is more like an excuse to maintain the real engine of the picture, the frantic tone. From beginning to end with almost no breaks, the movie continuously throws as much over-the-top gags and scenarios as possible, as if it fears that it would lose the younger viewer's attention at any point. And even when you think it's done with having a sugar rush moment with a scene, it jumps straight into the next where it quickly resumes showing as much jokes as it could think of with the materials that are on screen.
Maybe they're taking out people's brains and making them fight in a terror dome. Or maybe they're replacing everyone with robots.
As it sets all of its focus onto the comedy, the fast pace, and the action, it leaves the story to be as dry as SpongeBob on land. It wants the craziness to be the star of the picture instead of, the character that this movie is named after. It presents ideas of how they can expand Sandy Cheeks and her backstory, including meeting her family, her connection with the company that took everyone out of the ocean, and what is her purpose in Bikini Bottom. But as interesting as they may sound, this movie does absolutely nothing with them. At the most, they're just conveniences to keep the wackiness going, and this has no trouble sacrificing any form of character development or plot structure to fit in more unnecessary gags, leaving the story to feel like it was originally meant for a special or a regular episode that had to be stretched out to become feature length, and the emotional core to be empty where I did not care about what would happen to anyone in this film. And keep in mind that I consider myself to be a SpongeBob fan. That requires some effort to create something that I loved watching as a kid and make it feel like a mistake.
I thought I knew you.
This is not to mention that it disregards to give itself any form of originality. Because it rehashes so much from previous SpongeBob movies to create its own story, there's next to nothing that feels new in this. I can't help but feel like I've seen so much of this before in the previous SpongeBob features, like having an adventure in a live-action CG hybrid world, a live-action villain played by a recognizable celebrity, going on a road trip, the entirety of Bikini Bottom in peril, a sporadic musical number. It's really starting to feel like this is the fourth movie of the franchise because it's becoming dependent on its own formula, where those elements that were once fun have now become predictable and stale.
Nobody can do this! It's crazy! Oops! Oh!
But I could honestly forgive this movie for all of this. I wouldn't be so hard on its problems if it could actually be funny. As long as the gags are entertaining, then the experience will at least be worthwhile to get a good laugh. But, oh my goodness! That's probably the worst thing about this movie! It tries so desperately hard to be hilarious with every joke that it forces out at every second that they don't just make the movie unfunny, but also increasingly annoying. At best, there are only a handful of gags that gave me a slight chuckle. But due to the poorly executed timing, cringy puns, animation that tries too hard to be over the top, and running old jokes from the show to the ground, every time it tries to be funny is an additional reason for me to resent this picture.
Hey, I'm getting slap-slapped.
Hang on!
This is sadly a case of a movie that doesn't want to be a movie. Instead of telling an actual story that's about one of the series' characters, it's just an extended episode of the show that acts like one long wacky cartoon, and a terrible one at that. The animation. I don't know why this became a thing, but now every SpongeBob sequel has to change its computer animation style and given to a different studio. They started out strong by greatly capturing the series' aesthetics in 3D with Sponge Out of Water by Illura, now called Method Studios. Then they went a bit more stylized, which is a nice touch, with Sponge on the Run by Micros Image, and now with Saving Bikini Bottom, they went back to something a little closer to the second film that's more straightforward as SpongeBob in CG by Pipeline Studios. I'll give the team credit that in terms of bringing the show into 3D, this is not a bad attempt. It is able to capture the designs and the color palette of the show where it is able to recognizably look like SpongeBob SquarePants, and the animation allows the characters to come to life in a similar way to stay true to who they are. I also appreciate that the film toned down the textures compared to Sponge on the Run. It shows that it is there like Sandy's fur and Mr. Krabs' shell, but it is subtle enough where it's not too distracting and take away some of the character's recognizability.
I think I'm gonna hurl! Take us out of here! Again! Oh, can we go backwards this time?
If you look at the animation itself, it's a decent effort to use computer animation to bring the world of SpongeBob to life. When seeing it in the context as a SpongeBob movie, however, this is where the visuals fall apart, and it suddenly no longer looks impressive. Maybe Paramount did not give as much resources to this as they did with the previous features, since this is meant to be exclusive to Netflix instead of being in theaters. But this feels like a downgrade in quality. If I didn't know this was for a feature, I'd expect that this was for a game like Battle for Bikini Bottom or Cosmic Shake.
This time we're downwind. Definitely downwind.
I'm sure the animation team did the most that they could do with the materials they have, but Paramount approached the budget of this the same way Mr. Krabs would. And yet, that doesn't seem to stop them from asking the team to do so much more than what they are capable of. It's like they were given the resources to build an episode and were expected to make an entire movie out of it. This is why I think the animation really falls short. The film tries to do all these extravagant moments like action scenes, characters flying around, a musical number, and have the CG interact with live action, but it shows that it's biting off more than it could chew. There are times when the bigger moments have to cut corners and lead to some unpleasant elements like the characters' models looking soulless, or even question some of the rendering if it looks finished.
Not a hair.
In a way, the movie is kind of self-aware that it doesn't have the talent to properly pull off what it wants to do. And to compensate for that, this is where it tries to make the animation be as over the top as possible, especially to try to give the humor a boost. I already said that I hate this, and this is what made me hate the directing, because this is an obvious mask to cover the shortcomings. It thinks being so wacky with its visuals would seem like a creative choice, and it could get away with it because it's a style. But because it lacks the comprehension of what makes SpongeBob's comedy work, it makes the movie's problems more obvious. And the more it flaunts its cartooniness, the more it feels like an admission that it doesn't know what it's doing. But the worst case of all this is when it tries to blend live action with animation. I'm sorry, but this studio is not well equipped for this kind of job. Any attempts to blur the line between reality and cartoons, or any realistic visual effects, are so bad that you wish the entire thing is blurred so that you don't witness the monstrosity that it presents. And you never know how bad they could be. Sometimes it's just not good-looking CG, sometimes they can look too out of place, and sometimes...
What? It's just an ordinary crabby... Oh my goodness!
I understand that they're saving their resources for bigger projects like a theatrically released SpongeBob movie, and I get that the animation team did the most with what they could do, but if the company expects a whole movie with only a fraction of what it needs, then why even put in the effort to make a movie at all? The characters. If there is one positive thing I could say about Saving Bikini Bottom, is that the characters do supply some good voice acting. Of course, this shouldn't come as a surprise, since they are performed by professional voice actors who have been playing their respective characters for about 25 years since this movie's release. They know their roles more than anyone else, so they make the most out of their emotions to make them feel as authentic as they are in the show. I'll even include the actors playing Sandy's family into this as well, because they also deliver a fun and lively performance that highlight their personalities, including Craig Robinson as Paw.
Whatever Sandy wants to do with her life is okay by us, cause we love her.
Johnny Knoxville as Randy.
I got voted most irresistible wink in Texas. 8 years running.
And Gray Delisle gets extra points for playing the rest of Sandy's relatives.
I always hoped the circus would be handed down through the women folk.
I gave him one of these. I gave him one of those. Cheeks family, let's roll.
However, great acting can only take you so far if the writing doesn't provide them with great materials to work with. And since the script is absolutely hopeless with the way it rather wants to tell insufferably bad jokes instead of presenting a story, the characters barely do much other than supply the comedy or briefly explain why Bikini Bottom is getting kidnapped. I've already mentioned how this film poorly handles Sandy Cheeks, despite how she's the main character of the movie, but allow me to show you the full picture with her. Sandy's main role is to initiate what this movie is all about, which is to save Bikini Bottom by using her smarts and squirrel-like abilities.
Wow! Sandy, you never told me you were a flying squirrel!
Well, actually, it's more like gliding, but I don't like to brag.
And like I said, the movie does present ideas that help expand her backstory, such as how she was part of her family's circus business, or why she lives in Bikini Bottom with the fish folk. But never once does it make those moments feel like they matter either to the story or to who Sandy Cheeks is. Maybe there is a bit of a message regarding who you consider to be your family, but even that feels like it was tacked on at the last minute without leaving much of an impact.
All I'm good for is scampering.
It's also worth noting that she has a new assistant named Sparky, a robot horse who contributes to Sandy's adventure by... Then there is the Cheeks family, who each give a taste of their respective personalities, with Randy debatably being the most prominent as a bad boy heartthrob with a good heart. Sadly, that's the most they do with their personalities, as their actual jobs is to help the leads be one step closer to their destination and save the city. And alongside the squirrel is SpongeBob, whose purpose in the film honestly made me understand Squidward's perspective of him. Since he's the sidekick of the picture, SpongeBob is reduced to being the comic relief whose stupidity contrasts Sandy's intellect. I'll even say that his contribution makes the movie worse because he's the main supplier of the comedy, where 90% of the time he tells terrible puns and over-exaggerates his movements. I guess SpongeBob doesn't want to waste his best materials on Netflix and dump out all the ones that aren't even good enough for the show.
Hey, that whistle had a nice ring to it.
Someone kill me now.
As for the rest, it's mandatory that they occasionally show up, since this is still a SpongeBob movie, but the most they do is present what the villain's intentions are with Bikini Bottom.
Maybe this is one of those, what do you call those scary movies you have when you sleep?
And speaking of the villain, the one who took the city out of the ocean is Tsunami. Get it like the big wave! As the head of Boots, she has this obsession with fish to the point of wanting to turn the Bikini Bottom residents into pets that kids can treat as toys, as she gets additional assistance from her two dim-witted henchmen, Phoebe and Kyle. And may I say that with the kind of acting and comedy they present, they are the perfect personification of the movie's writing.
I can't believe you made us follow through with Sue's evil plan.
Hello? She bought us a vending machine?
With money from our paycheck.
We get paychecks?
But with Sue, Wanda Sykes' performance is fine, but everything else about her is dumb. Her motivation is dumb, her pug is dumb, her backstory is traumatizing, I mean, what the fridge is with her head, and even her twist is dumb. In short, the villain sucks.
I think everyone needs a refresher, don't you?
I cannot say that there wasn't any effort put onto this picture, and the voice actors are proof that they care about what they do. The problem is that the movie gave these characters far less to work with than what they regularly get during an 11-minute episode. I previously heard from those who saw the leak that this movie was bad. Even SpongeBob fans who watched it said that this was not good at all. But to be honest, after seeing it for myself, I was not prepared to discover that it was this bad. Saving Bikini Bottom, the Sandy Cheeks movie, is not just the worst SpongeBob movie, but is also one of the worst animated films you could find on Netflix, and one of the worst things to feature SpongeBob. As much as it may have some good voice acting, it is a complete lost cause with terrible writing, a story that barely exists, weak animation, characters that contribute less than they do in an episode, and the worst comedy from the franchise yet. This is like if SpongeBob SquarePants was produced by early Sony Animation, sharing the same traits as Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs and Hotel Transylvania, where it acts like an obnoxiously annoying cartoon to distract viewers from its lack of quality. I like SpongeBob, but I personally would not recommend this feature to anybody. There are all the other SpongeBob movies that are available that could give you so much more than this. I'd even say that you get more entertainment out of a single episode than this whole movie. And on that note, if you enjoyed this review, then hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. I got a lot more nautical nonsense where that came from. I'll admit that I never watched the series beyond season 5 or any of those spin-off shows, but Saving Bikini Bottom is the worst SpongeBob project I've seen yet. And that's why I'm giving this the Animat seal of garbage. Maybe SpongeBob and Patrick were right about Texas this whole time.
Hey, Patrick, what am I now?
Stupid?
No, I'm Texas.
What's the difference?
Now that's production value.
It's a great video.
Cooter doesn't like suck-up stuff.